it's a good idea to do that measuring, but don't worry about it being too pedantic. So, yeah, no, you're doing good. Now, the shadow goes into his hair as well, so don't be afraid of putting it right up. Now, can you see how you've turned him into a three-dimensional portrait already? Okay, so I'm going to put in where his eyes are, and this eye is slightly bigger than that eye because, and they're probably not an eye width apart, they're closer because he's tilted slightly. So that's probably too close. So if I do one eye about that length, and I'm not drawing the almond eyes like I told you, well I could I suppose, but this eye, if I did that, that would be way too big. So I do need to look at the proportion, and it's very, very tiny.
What proportion are you looking at?
I'm comparing the size of one eye to the next, because it's only if you're looking straight ahead that the eyes are the same. Okay? But it's only marginally bigger. So if I go, that's that size and that's that size, that's about right. But they're probably too close together, so I will shift them across. So that's more or less where his eyes are and the proportions. Now, on the side of his head, it's about an eye width to the end of his head. And that's actually where his ear is. So I'm marking places in. The side of his head is very close to where his eye is. So I'm just going to try and estimate where it is. Now I'm going to use that. My pencil's not big enough. I'm going to measure how wide he is across his eyes, like I mentioned before, and compare it to the height. And he's just a little bit wider than 1.5. So I've adjusted my measurements from before. So if this is, so it's just under 1.5, I think. If that's how wide he is, then 1.5 of those. That's another half. Is it about the same as that? Okay, so all the way to there is 1.5. Okay, and I'm going to put that there, and I'll get a much better proportion than I did in the first one I did. Okay, that looks better, doesn't it, already?
Yeah.
So his eyes are in the middle, bottom of his chin's going to be there. I'm also going to put this line from top of his head, center of the top of his head, down through his nose, through the nub of his nose, down like that, so that when I put his features in, they're going to match. I'm now going to look at those shapes of tone and the proportion of how far down his nose is. So if we go with what we measured before, which was about an eye width down to the bottom of his nose, or no, not the bottom of his nose, to the top of his nostril. His nostril should start about there. And I'm going to hold my pencil vertically and go, okay, his nostril is definitely in line with the inner edge of his eye. And the side of his nose, the side of the light, so he's got a little bit of darkness that I can see of the nose. So the light part of his nose is pretty much in line with that eye. But there's shadow on his nose which goes a bit further. So the edge of his nose is actually in the middle of his eye. Are you all understanding what I'm doing?
Yep.
So I'm putting a vertical line up like that. If I drop a vertical line down, it means the edge of his nose needs to finish there. So the angle of his nose is going to be like that. Okay? So I'm roughly putting in my construction lines. Now that was the top of his nostril, and I'm going, okay, the nub of his nose is there. I know it's there because I've done my curved line like that. So the nose is in the center of that line, and so there's going to be a a nostril there-ish. Now that's not working for me at the moment, but something's going wrong with that. But I'll correct it when I come to it. So it doesn't look right to my head, but I'm going to say trust my eyes for the moment, and I'll deal with it when I've put everything in, because I dearly want to correct that. I really, really do. But if I look at the shape, yeah, that looks about right. The shape of this tone, this here against the nose. I'm coming down, he's got high cheekbones, and they go down. That was the bottom of his face there. And I've done exactly what I've told you not to do. I've done that angle straight across. So I'm going to just adjust that, and I'll put that in again in a second. Now I'm going to put the mouth in, and we said that the bottom of the mouth was about halfway down. So the bottom of the mouth is about there, and he's got this lovely firm jaw line. So I'm using these shapes of tone to help me estimate the proportions. Okay, I could measure how big is the white part of his chin and compare that to an eye, but he's probably too far away for me to do it successfully. But yeah, that's about right. So I'm using everything within my power to not draw lips and eyes and mouths. Now I'm checking where is the edge of his lips against his face. It's not the same as it was when we were looking straight on, and it is about the same as the edge of his nose, actually, vertically, or maybe a bit further. So what did I say? That was the bottom of his lips, so they go out a little bit further than the nose, and on the other side it's about the same as that. So you see, I came in much too far, and I knew that I had. So the other side of his lips is going to be there. That goes round like that. If I look at the shape of his lips, they are like that. I'm not very happy with that, actually, because my brain is saying, no, that's actually quite short, Karen. So that's coming down a bit further. Looking at the space between his mouth and the edge of his face is much bigger. I think that I've done his nose and his mouth too wide. So I'm adjusting until I'm happy with it. Okay, so far so good, I think. So I've established basic areas. His eyebrow does that. His eyebrow does that. Now I'm going to have a problem here because his face, his eyebrow actually, see my head did that with his eyebrow. His eyebrow does nothing like that. It's what my head wanted to draw. His eyebrow actually goes off to the side of his face, and it actually goes off the side there. I'm trying to not draw his eye yet because I'm not very happy yet with what I've got on this page, so I'm just trying to get those three-dimensional shapes of tone that I was talking about to help this come together so that I can actually see that something decent is happening. And that's not a bad thing to do, is to do these shapes of tone, because otherwise we'd be going into detail at this stage, and I don't want to go into detail at this stage. So I'm just gradually building up these shapes of tone that I keep on talking about, which include tiny little shapes of nostrils and things like that. Now, to me, that distance is too far. And if I measure halfway, which is there, I have shifted his mouth down. I haven't listened. So what I'm going to do is, and this is a rule for erasing, is I'm going to shift his mouth up. So that should be the bottom of his mouth.
Bottom of his bottom lip.
Bottom of his bottom lip, correct. So before you rub out, that's the bottom of his bottom lip. So the middle of his mouth is there. before you rub out, use this as a reference point to go, okay, I'm going to draw
That's his bottom lip.
his lips.
That's his lip.
And now you can rub out what you didn't want. That's much better proportion. I knew something was going wrong. You knew it all the time, you just didn't want to say. Nah, don't apologise, I'm teasing you. Okay, very well defined lips. Knew there was a reason I wanted him to model. He's modelled for our class before. Okay, so that's much better. It is still quite wide there, so maybe something's going down there that isn't working. But I'm prepared to accept it. Now, be careful with facial hair, because if I put in the slight moustache there, it's going to darken the tones here. So unless I'm doing a very complete portrait, I'm going to leave it out, or I'm going to hint at it in this side, and maybe just put a couple of dirty marks there to show. And the lightness, I hope, is coming a little bit.
It is.
So that's why I'm saying it's not about the detail. It's about getting the character half the way out. I am rushing a little bit because I want you to have decent time to draw, but you're all waiting for me to draw the eyes, aren't you? I am. So he's looking. And it's all dark in there. I can't see any white in that corner.
No.
And certainly this side is also. I can see some white there. He's looking. Actually, I'm not sure that I have captured a likeness, but it's okay. And even though I'd measured at the beginning, I don't think, so I would re-put it in and I would rub out there, and I'd start adjusting to see why it's not a likeness. He might still be too, I might adjust the shape of his jaw. But I would do a lot more, after I'd got the basic features down, I would do a lot more adjusting. I would, add the tone right to the edge of his head there. And I know I'm not taking, great care for the toning in, the type of mark that I'm putting in. But that's how I go about doing my portraits, and I hope that's been a bit helpful.